ipakita natin sa buong mundo na ang Pilipino may kakayanan na magpahusay ng kabuhayan Pilipino.
That we call on all patriotic Filipinos to discard ideological differences, party affiliations, disparity of religious beliefs and regional origin, to close our ranks, stand behind one flag, commit our honor, dedicate our lives to fight as best we can in defense of our country.
Ang ating katipunan. Ang ating katipunan. Ang palatuntunang maghahatid sa inyo ng mahahalagang impormasyon tungkol sa mga kaganapan sa loob at labas ng bansa.
Ang ating katipunan.
Magbibigay liwanag sa mga katanungang nagdudulot ng pagkalito sa mga mamamayan hango sa aral ng pandaigdigang kasaysayan.
Ang ating katipunan.
Makikinig sa inyong mga daing at kuro-kuro sa pagsusuri ng mga kasalukuyang suliranin ng ating bayan at ng buong mundo.
Ang ating katipunan.
Maglalatag ng kalutasan ng mga sanhi ng paghihirap ng kalagayan at kabuhayan ng sambayanan.
Ang ating katipunan.
Ihahatid sa inyo ni Itos Valdes ng Philippine LaRouche Society, Save the Nation Movement, Solidarity for Sovereignty Movement, Renaissance Philippines, at Partido Politikal ng Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino, kasama si Cathy Cruz.
Okay, magandang gabi po mga katipon sa Pilipinas. Ito po ang ating katipunan. Muling sumasa inyo mga tagapakinig upang magbigay ng mahalagang impormasyon, magbigay liwanag at higit sa lahat makinig sa inyong mga daing at kuro-kuro hinggil sa mga problemang patuloy na nagpapahirap sa ating kalagayan at kabuhayan. Sa susunod na 2 oras, sisikapin po namin ipaliwanag ang iba-ibang bahagi ng ating ekonomiya at ang mga mabibigat na local and international issues na may malaking epekto sa ating buhay at kinabukasan. Ito po ang inyong katipon na si Valdes, kasama ang co-host natin dito na si Itos Valdes at ang iba pang mga kasama sa Save the Nation Movement, Philippine LaRouche Society at ang Partido Politikal ng Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino. Kami po dito ay nag-aanyaya sa inyo na makibahagi sa ating talakayan sa pagsusuri ng mga kasalukuyang problema at paghahanap ng kaukulang solusyon. Okay, ano bang magandang pag-usapan natin ngayon?
Yeah, so I gusto ko, I wanted to ask you about yesterday kasi napaka-importanting guest po yung kahapon sa Talakayang Bayan natin.
Yes.
Kasi Carlos Arcilla. So maybe you can tell us a summary of the guesting and what he represents and why we're pushing for nuclear power.
Well, alam nyo, ever since before, the Katipunan Demokratikong Pilipino and the Save the Nation movement for maybe a good 20-25 years now, we've been pushing for the restart of the nuclear power plant.
Right.
No? And of course, maraming kumukontra dito, mostly because of ignorance. No? And the others because of ideology.
Right.
Ideology kasi yung mga iba talagang ayaw nilang umunlad ang bansa. Dahil pag meron tayong pamamaraan para umunlad, nababawasan ng kanilang mga nare-recruit panglaban sa pamahalaan. Alam niyo na po kung sino itong mga ito, mga kaliwa, di ba po? Tapos yun din mga ideologues ng environment. Ayaw na ayaw din nila yung kaunlaran kasi ang nakatutok sila sa kapakanan ng kalikasan at kadalasan itong mga ideologues na ito, isasakripisyo nila yung buhay ng tao para maisalba daw yung kalikasan. Yung mga iba naman nadadala dito, hindi nila naiintindihan dahil yung po mga pseudo-environmentalists, nagpapanggap, tsaka kunwari,
campaigners.
Gusto nilang protektahan ng ating kalikasan. Pero ang punot dulo ng kanilang kampanya ay laban sa sangkatauhan.
Right.
Because pag tinulak niyo po yung environment, sasabihin nila, kinakailangan walang carbon, kinakailangan walang factories.
Carbon dioxide.
Kailangan walang development kung walang factories.
Right.
Kung walang factories, wala pong trabaho ang tao. Walang trabaho ang tao, maghihirap. No? At pag naghirap, matutuluyan silang mamatay. And this has been proven, this has been presented so often. Kaya lang kuminsan napakahirap dahil ang mainstream media wala sa atin no? Hindi sila tumutulong sa ganito dahil malaking pera ang pumapasok dito sa mga mainstream media para ilihis ang taong bayan dito sa katotohanan. Now, balik tayo dito sa kagabi.
Kay Carlos Arcilla.
Yeah.
Did he say anything new? What was the...
Ang pinag-usapan namin ni Dr. Carlos Arcilla, unang-una si Dr. Carlos Arcilla po. Siya ang head ng PNRI, Philippine Nuclear Research Institute.
Right.
Yan pong PNRI, naitatag yan po nung panahon ni Corazon Aquino. Pero ang unang pangalan niyan ay PAEC.
PAEC, what does PAEC stand for?
PAEC is a Philippine Atomic Energy Commission. Okay?
So there's a difference.
Yung commission was a Philippine Atomic Energy Commission is a regulatory body. Siya po ang magbibigay ng parang go signal o lisensya para magpatakbo ang nuclear power plant. Kung kasi may plano tayo noon pumasok sa nuclear energy development. At nagtatag po si Presidente Marcos ng PAEC. Actually, even before President Marcos, PAEC was already organized. Philippine Atomic Energy Commission. Okay, it is a commission.
Right.
It is a body that is part of the Constitution that is under the office of the President. Pagpasok po ni Cory, binuwag niya itong
The whole program.
PAEC, no? Tinanggal niya yung Nuclear Energy Development Program. Tapos, ang ginawa nila ay binago yung pangalan PNRI, Philippine Nuclear Research Institute. Pang-research na lang daw, no? At hindi yung regulatory function dahil hindi naman daw tayo papasok sa nuclear energy.
So para siyang gumagawa ng mga study,
Right.
gumagawa ng mga feasibility kung pwede to o wala to, pero wala talagang power.
Actually, meron pa doon, pero hindi nila tinanggal at sa diretso yung power. Andun pa rin. But later on, ang sinasabi ni Dr. Arcilla, kinakailangan gagawing very clear na yung regulatory body tsaka yung research.
Right. You need both.
You need both. Kasi yung research, marami tayong magagamit niya sa research pagdating po sa radiation kasi yung radiation that nanggagaling po sa nuclear, marami po tayong magagawa.
Right.
Kaya natin magamit sa medicine, kaya natin magamit sa agriculture, no?
Desalination, everything.
Lahat yan.
Rail, electricity,
Everything.
lahat.
So, dapat meron ding research component, sabi niya. At ang kadalasan, ang pinag-usapan namin kagabi, para lang matandaan itong mga ating mga tagapakinig.
Which you can watch pa rin.
You can watch. It's archived in our
Facebook
Talakayan Bayan yesterday.
Facebook and YouTube, pwede pong panoorin yan ulit.
It's more basically the technical aspects of and the political aspects of the Bataan Nuclear Power Plant.
Matagal na rin lumalaban tong si Carlos Arcilla, di ba?
Yeah, he's a scientist. Dr. Carlos Arcilla is a first scientist, a geologist.
Yes.
And he's world class and renowned. He's been giving all kinds of talks in the different international bodies.
Yes.
And more than any geologist that we have now here, ay medyo siya, talagang alam niya kung anong pinag-uusapan niya.
Magaling si Carlos Arcilla. So nakasama namin yun sa Congress hearing.
Right.
When we went to Congress to present our nandun din si Carlos Arcilla. Siyempre, marami rin kumukontra, lalo na yung mga networks ng ating mga kaibigan sa kaliwa, our environmentalists, and of course, we get into the history also of why the nuclear who was behind really the effort to shut this down for the country. So what we want to do in tonight's program po, ito na naman tayo. How is nuclear power connected to COVID?
Right.
Yan ang paksa po natin tonight. Very interesting. Like we like to connect things. Pero makikita nyo at the end of the show, makikita nyo po na it makes sense. So much sense. So again, after that opening summary by Chairman, I'd like to show a video from our friends at LaRouche PAC. I think this was 2014. We would like to propose, or we would like to put forward the idea that we've been doing before, that it is not a question of the feasibility or the capability of nuclear power, but it is purely a political effort to shut this down. Okay, and there is a lot other things attached to this that in essence it's anti-human, anti-development, siyempre anti-Filipino. So let's play that video first para makita natin. I think.
Why are you so afraid of nuclear power? Think closely for a moment. Is it because it's truly horrid, dangerous, evil? Or are you just capitulating to popular opinion? We have nearly 7 billion people on this planet today, most of whom have a standard of living not even worthy of the lowliest of beasts. What would it take to uplift the over 2 billion or so people who are on the verge of starvation to a decent living standard? What would it take to give them a universal healthcare system, a network of public education facilities, an integrated high-speed rail system, water management, and irrigation channels for increased agriculture? What would it take to give them the power to be truly human? Well, it's going to take power, and lots of it. And I'm not talking about filling the oceans with windmills and the deserts with solar reactors. I'm talking about nuclear power as the only source of energy which has the power to get this society out of a dark age. Now, in light of this, think again. Why are you so afraid of nuclear power? Well, it's because you don't know anything. The proponents of a nuclear-free world are not the humanitarian savers of society, defending you from the harmful effects of nuclear radiation and waste. Rather, they consist of an oligarchical grouping whose intention is to eliminate over 5 billion people on this planet today, whether they are witting of that intention or not. It is those people such as Prince Philip and Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, the founders of the frankly fascist World Wildlife Fund, who have made it their explicit goal to ensure that there is absolutely no human progress, meaning no science. It is these and others like them who hold sway over the popular opinion of the day, especially in regards to environmentalism, which is in reality nothing more than a return to a practice of mass slavery by society at large, dressed up in the fantastical garb of green ideology. Let's take a look at what today's environmentalists idiotically call nuclear waste. First off, let's free ourselves from the false term waste, developed by religious fanatics, and use the more appropriate term, recyclable uranium or other radioactive material. What happens after enriched uranium cycles through a nuclear reactor, you might ask? Well, contrary to popular belief, the byproduct of a uranium reaction is not a green blob of material, which after being dumped into barrels and buried in the ground will cause you to grow an extra eye out of your head or an arm out of your butt, but contains an abundance of radioactive isotopes eagerly awaiting to be reused. Spent uranium contains up to 96% and sometimes even more unused but useful elements in it, with thousands of metric tons of fissile uranium-235 and plutonium-239. In addition, other isotopes such as cesium, strontium, and americium remain for mankind's use in fields of medicine and everyday household appliances, ranging from cesium and strontium used in the sterilization of medical supplies to americium used in smoke detectors. Clearly, nuclear waste has more to it than you previously thought, and nuclear power is not as linear as you may think. However, since the late 1970s, we have stopped recycling nuclear power, we have shut down most of our power plants, and have halted research into better methods of nuclear fission and fusion power. What a paradox! Why have you allowed such precious material to go to waste? With the assassination of profound humanitarian leaders during the 1960s, leaders such as Kennedy and Martin Luther King, who attempted to revive the real American dream, to develop society at large and uplift the morally beaten and poor population of the United States, the already degenerating and morally weakened U.S. society became afraid. They saw that those who stood for principle and morality and the rights of mankind were beaten down and destroyed. And they said, that can't happen to me. I'm privileged. I'm part of the middle class, the white-collar class. So rather than standing up and fighting for those who gave their lives to make our republic better, the 68ers broke. The dominant culture became smoking weed, tripping on acid, snorting cocaine, and having sex with everything that walks, talks, and barks all at once. In essence, they did nothing, at least nothing of relevance. They created a phony, fraudulent revolution because they didn't have the guts to do what Martin Luther King or Kennedy had done. This was exactly what the British Empire was waiting for. With the creation of the Congress for Cultural Freedom, the World Wildlife Fund, and other such organizations, they put in place the institutions which would further the cultural degeneracy of the 68ers. The boomer generation turned to environmentalism, the epitome of an anti-science, anti-industry, anti-progress outlook. Any sentiment of anti-nuclear today comes from this historical context. It comes from the unnatural fear which gripped the baby boomers in the wake of 1968. Today, with the baby boomer generation in positions of leadership in the Congress and other institutions, environmentalism has become the dominant characteristic of our culture. It has no grounding in reality. It began as a capitulation to popular opinion and an impotence to fight for what is truly human, the development of this society and this culture. So think back to those 7 billion people still alive on this planet, and think of those 2 billion who are fighting for their very survival. What is needed to develop them? Still afraid of nuclear power?
Okay, so that was a quick video. I think that was 2014, no? Hindi ako nagkakamali. But it shows how nag-devolve po yung kanilang policy pati na sa US. Primarily, devolve into from Kennedy in the 60s na parang let's send a man to the moon, yung science po nila at lahat, to
Nag-deteriorate.
pinatay po nila yung mga leaders, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and then Robert Kennedy. Sunod-sunod po yan. Tapos, nagpalit po yung policy nila from looking at science to develop and feeding more people and increasing the amount of energy in the world to help save the world, which is what John F. Kennedy wanted. It devolved po, hindi evolved, devolved into tinatawag niyang sex, rock, drugs, counterculture na walang science, basta mag-enjoy ka na lang. So, parang yung outlook ng mga tao at the time, in the 1960s, naging parang mag-enjoy na muna tayo. Huwag na tayo mag-isip ng ano ba yung mas maganda. And that stunted the growth of American nuclear. So, labanan po yan. Tapos may lumabas, you want to add to this, may lumabas yung anti-nuclear, anti-science and anti-nuclear mga authors. Diba? Later on. But maybe you want to comment.
I just want to add that yung si John F. Kennedy, malamang, kanya maraming reasons na sinasabi kung bakit siya pinatay. Kasi lumaban daw siya sa military-industrial complex.
Right.
This is a conspiratorial group between the top military and top industrial heads, mga manufacturers
ng weapons and airplanes and guns.
Gusto nila tuloy-tuloy ang gera. At ito naman si Kennedy, naghahanap ng paraan paano maitigil yung gera, lalo-lalo na yung sa Vietnam. Di ba pa? At dahil dito, sabi nila, that might be a more immediate cause. That the other reason why there's people that didn't want it is because he was moving the rest of the world, leading the rest of the world, not just the United States, towards an era of development using science. One of the other thing that you must understand at that time, mayroon parang competition of ideology. One is the Western world that led by the
Cold War, after World War II.
Led by the US.
Yes.
The other one was the Soviet Union.
Right.
At sino ba ang mas mahusay na ekonomiya? Obviously, at that time, tayo alam natin, dahil iba yung sa komunista, napilit sila. Pero ang ginawa ng mga komunista, kinuha nila yung mga resources nila, maski naghihirap yung mga tao. At itinulak nila dito sa space exploration.
Itong Russians. Yung Russians.
Yung Soviet Union na yun, At,
USSR pa yun, hindi pa Russia. The whole USSR.
Nagdala sila ng unang-unang satellite. Satellite yun mo ng Sputnik ang tawag doon.
Right.
Kanya yung Sputnik 5 yung kanilang
Right.
Pero Sputnik,
yun yung aso?
Hindi, wala pang aso yan. Basta napagdala nila sa raketa tapos nalagay nila sa orbit ng Earth. Pero ano lang siya, nagbi-beep lang siya. Beep!
Okay,
yun lang.
Okay.
Yung beep na yun nasisignal na kukuha sa Earth.
Okay.
This was the very first time. That was the first step towards
The
space exploration.
So that was the very first satellite ever put by humankind.
Bilog yun. Tapos meron na antenang ganyan.
Simple lang siguro.
4 areas merong antena pero bilog para siyang bola. I don't even know how big that was. Maybe as big as a drum or something. Pero it was sending a signal back to Earth. That's the first time. and it was doing this from outer space. And that was fantastic because imagine wala man tayong ganitong klaseng media, but it was reaching the rest of the world, and the world was awed that something like that could be done. And of course, America would not
Hindi magpapatalo.
So nagkaroon sila ngayon ng race.
Space race ang
Space
tawag.
race. At nung
Unahan.
nung nagkaroon ng nagkaroon na ng manned bago yun, nagpadala sila ng mga ng aso yata at chonggo.
Na pagbuhay, okay pa.
Hindi ko alam kung bumalik yung buhay. Pero basta nakita nila buhay pa nung lumilipad doon. Pagkatapos ng tao na, sa Russia, si Gagarin. Yuri Gagarin.
Tama.
Tapos yun ang sa Amerika naman, sa Amerika, I think was John Glenn. I'm not sure. Alan Shepard. Alan Shepard was the first one that orbited. Now, at that time, ang sabi ni Kennedy, by this time, 10 years from now,
This is John F. Kennedy.
yeah, we will land a man on the moon. So it was a race to the moon. And of course, 10 years after, although pinatay na si Kennedy, the US landed a man on the moon. But what I'm trying to get at here is because of this, man started looking into the science more heavily. And as it went into this whole project of space exploration and landing a man in the moon, this science opened up many facets, and reap benefits in the process of trying to get a man in the moon.
Right.
Nagkaroon tayo noon because alam mo na yung mga scientists magte-test ng mga iba-ibang materials na magandang gamitin papunta sa moon.
Right.
Kakailanganin matibay, kakailangan magaang, and all of that. Those materials started getting commercialized into the economy. Everything, including microwave ovens, including management systems like the PERT CPM, yung management, how do you make decisions, yun mga ganyan.
Kasi malaking proyekto yan. At
Because it's such a big project. And all of that was being, as it was being learned, the economy started to benefit from it. Wala pa silang, hindi pa umaabot sa moon.
Right.
They were already benefiting from this. Pati na yung robotics. Alam niyo po yung robotics, kailan nag-umpisa yan? That was the time.
Yeah.
Kasi naghahanap silang mechanization, na parang remote, yung parang remote control natin ngayon, Pero nung gumahanap sila, tsaka yung robotics, which means hindi kailangan yung tao.
Right.
All of that was started during that decade, that whole decade. So you can see, nagkaroon sila nagkaroon ng level of a potential level of improving the quality of life only through science and creativity. Now, ang ayaw dyan, meron mga ayaw dyan sa ganyan.
Right.
They don't like that.
Yeah. I wanted to say, during that time, while Kennedy had a interest or had a thrust, he understood intrinsically, because of his education, because of what he grew up with, what he read, and his influence. He knew that this must be the way to go through science and development. May mga speeches po tayo sa internet. You can look at Kennedy's speeches on science and development. Not just for the US po, but for mankind. Yan ang thrust ni Kennedy. Ngayon, there was this other force na tinawag ni Eisenhower the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
That was also pressuring Kennedy to go into Vietnam to wage war.
Expand the war in
Expand the war in Vietnam. Kasi po, maalala po natin, after World War II, we had the Korean War, then you have the Vietnam War, and then you have the Afghan War, and then tuloy-tuloy na. So, but this kinds of fight is going on in all governments. So we wanted to say that, remember po, the previous administration of Eisenhower was the first time the international IAEA was established.
Right. Si Eisenhower po was the president before
Kennedy.
Kennedy.
Yes.
And the U.S. had just gotten over the World War II, no? Wherein Eisenhower's predecessor used General Eisenhower was the president 53 to 61. No? His predecessor was Harry Truman. At si Harry Truman, yung kaisa-isang presidente ng Amerika at ng buong mundo, kaisa-isang tao lang siya hanggang ngayon ang gumamit ng nuclear bombs.
At the time, atomic
bombs. No? Para patayin yung tao.
Oh,
No?
200,000, I think.
Well, eventually it's 500,000, but he ordered to drop it in Nagasaki and in Hiroshima.
At the close of the war.
Towards the close of the war, even when Japan was already sending feelers through the Vatican into the U.S., that they were surrendering. Right. Harry Truman, it seems, did not want them to surrender because he wanted to use the bomb. No? He wanted to. And many historians are saying, and we as well, Lyndon LaRouche was saying, that Harry Truman wanted to prove to the world that the U.S. had such a devastating weapon that if he demonstrated its killing power, he had the mistaken idea that nobody will dare challenge the United States anymore.
Right.
Ganyan po yung thinking nitong philosopher na si Bertrand Russell. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
No?
And just to on that point, maalala niyo po si Franklin Roosevelt po ang presidente ng World War II. Namatay po siya 1945, right? But not before establishing the Bretton Woods agreements. Ang pumalit po sa kanya si Harry Truman. And tinanggal po lahat ng impluwensya ni Franklin Roosevelt all around the world, not just the US, but around the world. And he started leaning towards what we call the British one world government people. Ito yung mga scientists, ito yung mga elite, yung mga bankero, mga na ayaw kay FDR, kay Franklin Roosevelt. Now, itong si Truman was influenced heavily by the writings and philosophies nga of Bertrand Russell at the time, that advocated that we need a one world government. And the way we can do it is to show the world that you shouldn't go against us kasi we have the most powerful weapon that mankind has ever created. So the atomic bomb was used to make an example. Hindi po kinakailangan gamitin, but they used it to make an example.
The weapon was obviously very strong. No? And the one who started that was Franklin Roosevelt. Kasi they were at war. No? And yung scientist niya, sila Oppenheimer, again. He asked them, okay, you start working on developing a bomb. Then when he developed that bomb, we don't have any doubts that he was never going to use it. No? But as America, he developed the capability to produce it.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
At dahil nga na testing yan sa Amerika, grabe ang lakas, no?
Right.
Parang mother of all bombs yan. Pero itong si Truman, ginamit niya kasi na-influensya siya ni Bertrand Russell.
Right. So, after using that, pasok si Eisenhower. And Eisenhower was very famous of saying, natatakot kasi siya because if the US had developed this really a devastating weapon that in the likes that no one in history has seen. And this is just atomic, hindi pa nuclear, atomic bomb. Yung killing power po, sabi niya, why don't we convert that power from swords to plowshares?
Right.
Which means, let us make it for civilian use.
Correct. Isingitan ko lang muna itos, no? Nung ginamit po ni Truman yung bomba at kalahating milyon eventually in 1 month ang mga namatay sa Japan. Siyempre nag-surrender na sila. Pero ganyan, ang mundo po was shocked. The whole world was shocked that such a weapon can do this.
Yeah.
And our generation, the ones that were born right after the war, our parents were talking about the next world war is going to kill everybody. So, kailangan wag tayong papasok sa gera, yung mga ganyan-ganyan. Dahil natakot lahat ng pag-iisip ng tao. And kinakatakutan noon ang bansang Amerika talaga.
Right.
Pero itong si Eisenhower, ayaw niya yung ganyan na ang tingin ng mundo sa Amerika.
Kasi may tension na eh. Kasi when US has that, matter of time lang yung Russia will develop their own.
Mag-ano yan.
So sasabihin niya, nako, delikado to.
Gawaan na ng bomba yan. Diba?
Damihan na lang to. So, yan ang sabi ni Eisenhower.
So Eisenhower said, ang atomic energy no, can be used for war and can be used for peace and for development. Then he had a program called Atoms for Peace.
Yes.
Nagtayo po tayo dito ng organization
Atoms for Peace.
Atoms for Peace na pinamunuan ni Itos about more than 10 years ago.
Oo, doon tayo lumalaban sa Kongreso.
Ang pangalan po Atoms for Peace. Pero ito sa US program. No? Ang resulta ng Atoms for Peace na yan, ang sinasabi ng Amerika, tutulungan namin kayo sa teknolohiya. Tuturuan namin kayo. Sinasabi niya sa buong mundo, kung sinong interesado, tutulungan namin kayo matuto tungkol sa atomic energy at para magamit nyo sa inyong kaunlaran.
Right.
So this became a program of Eisenhower as extending its hand of peace to the rest of the world because he called it Atoms for Peace.
Right. And he got many countries.
He got many countries. And the Philippines was among the first that benefited from this.
Yes.
Because of that Atoms for Peace, the US donated to us our reactor, a 3 megawatt reactor here in University of the Philippines.
Right.
No?
Right.
When that was done, we immediately, our government started to think about moving towards nuclear energy development, atomic energy development.
Right.
Dahil doon, naitayo itong PAEC, Philippine Atomic Energy Commission. No? This was the direction.
Yes.
And all of that moving towards development.
Right.
But in the United States and in the rest of the world, for that matter, meron mga taong ayaw. Ayaw nilang pumasok sa development ng mundo dahil baka mawala ang control nila sa mga iba-ibang bansa. Ito nga itong nangyari.
Yung pinapag-usapan nating deep state po, ang pinapag-usapan natin na one world government, yan yung mga great reset. These are the same people, not exactly the same physically, but these are the
Same mindset.
the same organizations that are part of the military-industrial complex, the deep state that has been there for a while, preventing po yung mga nations from actually developing their own populations. They're taking their resources and putting it to the beneficial use for their own populations in agriculture, in science, in chemicals, everything. So lahat ng efforts ng mga gobyerno after World War II, specifically after World War II, because there was science Kasi we will show later a video about free energy and why nuclear power is superior to everything you've ever discovered, no? And for the beneficial use. Pero ito po yung pinakamalakas. So, enter si Kennedy. Ito yung gusto niya mangyari. Yung mga kalaban niya ayaw. Pinatay po siya. Pasok si Martin Luther King. Another charismatic leader that has Christian principles. Ayaw niya ng mga race war.
Gusto niya development for all humankind.
Gusto niya development. Brothers daw lahat. Brothers and sisters. Pinatay. Shortly after that, yung kapatid ni John F. Kennedy, si Robert Kennedy, pinatay rin po. So this happened in a span of 10 years. About 9 years, 8 years, 9 years. So, and in 1969, finally, the U.S. landed a man on the moon, si Neil Armstrong nga, the famous, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind quote. But this is the fight. So, also, by this time, by the 60s, late 60s and 70s, yung mga nations po, pati na dito sa Southeast Asia, pati na sa Asia, we're looking, because of that Atoms for Peace program and the establishment of the International Atomic Energy Agency, right? Which is the regulatory industry. Parang maganda po, and then they look for, basta, we will talk about it later. Pero all of these nations started to seriously look at nuclear power. Kasi po, wala pong malapit, wala talagang makakatapat sa benefits po ng nuclear power. Okay? So, we were looking at it as a country seriously under Marcos at that time. And we were looking at developing. It does not happen overnight po. You need to establish certain things. You need to establish a chair. You need to develop nuclear physicists and engineers. That takes time. You go, may exchange program pa yan. But we were on that road. And going there, the future looked much brighter, because can we show that graphic about the energy which you like to talk about, yung coal and how nuclear is very much superior to everything that you can. I think Carlos Arcilla also said, di ba?
Yeah.
You just need to have a whole truckload. Ano yung sinasabi niyo kagabi?
Yeah.
So this graph just shows ganito. Ito yung parang development use of mankind, energy ng mankind throughout mankind's history.
Basically, nakikita niyo po dito, history of mankind, no? Ang unang-una po natin pinagkuhanan ng energy ay ang wood. Yun ang natuklasan natin, na pag itong kahoy, pinainit natin, kiniskisan natin, gumagawa siya ng apoy, at yung apoy na yon nakakatulong sa buhay natin. No?
Right.
Sigurado yan, mayroong mga napaso, nasunog, pero nakita natin nakakatulong yan. Just imagine, in those times, no?
Ancient.
Pakilagay, pabalik po dito sa balik natin dyan.
Show this, yeah.
Just imagine, in those ancient times, ano ang lalong-lalo na sa Western world, ang pinaka-problema nila yung winter, hindi po ba? Tapos, siyempre, pagdating ng winter, dahil wala silang ng sarili nila, malamang, malamang maraming namamatay sa winter. No? Tapos, so natuklasan nila ito. Anong pinakaginagawa ng wood? Gawa ng apoy, pampainit, tapos nabubuhay sila. Pangalawa, ano pang nangyayari dyan? Kasi yung mga pinapatay na hayop, pag nag-hunting sila, ganyan, no? Pag nakita nila, pag linagay nila sa apoy, parang linuto nila, mas tumatagal yung pagkain, mas marami na naman silang napapakain at tumatagal din ang buhay nila. Yan ang tinatawag na science, no? Tapos nagagamit sa kabutihan ng buhay ng tao at nagpaparami pa ng tao dahil natuklasan mo itong system of energy generation.
Right.
Pero hanggang ano lang yan, aabot lang yan, ang beneficyo niyan may limitation. Bakit po may limitation? Kasi habang dumadami yung tao, no, na pinapakain mo, aabot sa panahon na padami yung tao, pero ang energy, ang siyensya mo, hindi sapat. Tapos, anong nangyayari pag ganyan? Ang tao, nakatuklas sila ng another source of energy.
Kita nyo po yung graph na yan, di ba? Yung wood, paakyat, tas pababa. Pero may isa pang konektado dyan. Yung coal. May coal na graph na connected somewhere in the middle of the first
food, okay.
Of wood. And then paakyat yung gamit niya, pababa yung gamit ng wood.
Right. Yung coal, no? Ibang klaseng teknolohiya yan dun sa wood.
Uling.
Pero nagbibigay pa rin ng matinding init. Mas matindi.
It's a level up.
A level higher.
What do you call that?
Because of that, nakatuklas ng iba pang mga ang mga tao dahil meron na silang ngayon mas mainit, nakakagawa na sila ng mga swords, okay, ng mga tools, yung panghukay ng lupa at marami pang iba. Bandang huli, nalaman nila na yung init nakakagawa ng steam.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
Yung steam, alam nyo po yon, nagpapaandar ng what we call steam engine.
Right.
Dahil may puwersa po yan, pinapagalaw itong mga tren o yung mga ganyan, no? So, umaakyat po yung teknolohiya, umaakyat din ang kapasidad ng tao na gumanda ang kanilang kabuhayan.
Yeah, and you discover.
And they discover.
Because of science and the ability to have more people, to feed more people, pag may wood ka, may coal, ibig sabihin, meron kang mas matagal na init.
Right.
So pag mas matagal na init, meron kang liwanag, meron kang ganyan, tapos makakapag-aral ka. You discover new principles of the universe. And then, at that point, sa coal, sa umpisa ng coal tsaka wood, nakadiscover rin tayo ng paggamit ng oil. Heating lamps.
Okay.
Yung mga
yung oil, makikita nyo, nag-overlap po lahat yan, no? Pero makikita nyo yung downward line, no? Na pag yun, kung mananatili lang tayo dito sa ganyang klaseng source of energy,
the technology,
hindi natin ma-sustain ang pagdami ng tao, no?
Hindi natin mapapakain
lahat kasi dumadami. Tapos yung energy source mo ay limitado dito sa hanggang doon lang. So again, ang tao dahil sa kanyang kagalingan is able now to discover another source of energy. Tandaan niyo po, yung wood, yung coal, yung oil, iba-ibang teknolohiya yan.
Yes.
Iba-ibang siyensya yan.
Yes.
Ito pong sa nuclear, ganyan po din yan.
Yes.
It's a completely different science, different technology, but we discover it. You must also remember, you could not have discovered coal unless you got the use that you saw the beneficial use of wood.
Correct.
Right?
As an energy source.
You could not have gotten oil unless you were able to use the coal to develop the equipment,
Right.
no?
Right.
To drill for oil, no?
Yes.
And get it there, no?
Yes.
And then the same thing with nuclear. We could not have gotten into the discovery of nuclear without the science that have been developed, no?
Yes.
Using all of these types of energy.
Sabi nga nila, yung natural resources na yan, it's not a resource. Man made it a resource.
Right.
Nasa lupa lang yung oil. Anong gagawin natin kung wala tayong engine? Kung wala tayong
It's the creativity of man yung talagang nagpapaandar niyan.
man.
Nandyan lahat yan
Yes,
no?
yes.
Pero hindi natin alam kung paano gagamitin.
Right.
Pero natututunan natin and we discover its use. This is the beauty. That's why, pagpasensya nyo na po kami ngayon kung minsan meron para tayong classroom, no? Pero importante po natin malaman ang development po natin, no? At hindi tayo dapat mananatili sa isa dahil tuloy-tuloy po ang ating pagdidiscover gamit ang siyensya na nataglay ng mga ating mga natuklasan. Right. No?
And all throughout the development, can you show that graph again, Ben? All throughout this development of man, over time po yan, ha? Over millennia po yan, ang mankind's development. Marami pong kalaban yan. Maraming nag-stop ng development ng ganyan. Kasi ayaw nga nila na ikalat yung science and discovery of a new energy source. They want to keep it for themselves. So marami yan ang history po ng mankind. What you see here, you can say is the history of man. Because as you develop higher and higher levels of technology po, meaning you're capable of more. You're capable of educating your population. You're capable of building more. You're capable of discovering more principles in the universe. Pag nauna ka dyan, una ka na. Okay? May advantage ka na. Then there's another thing I want to show the graph where yung renaissance, yung population, yung explosion ng population nung industrial revolution tumaas. Pakihanap nga. Because when you can sustain more people because you discover agriculture, you discover plumbing, you discover energy sources and all. You can sustain more people. You can feed more people without fear. Wala pong takot. Hindi po delikado ang tao. 'Di ba? Padami ng tao. And this is where we're going to. Because if you discover these things, and makikita po natin sa graph, mahanap ni Veria mamaya. But you see, nung na-implement po yung Industrial Revolution na kumalat yung food, we were able to store food, discover the use of yung rice, ganito pala, lagay natin dito, store, tapos pag pangit yung weather, pwede natin pa rin pakainin ng tao. Nabubuhay yung tao, humahaba yung buhay nila. At walang takot. Hindi po problema ang pagdami ng tao.
Yeah. And science and creativity of man, when it's properly used, you're able to develop the methods of being able to sustain a greater population. Kayo po, just simple lang po, no, para makakita niyo.
Sige.
Pag wag muna, ito lang, sasabihin ko lang. Kung meron kayong isang pitak, paano po natin nalaman, isipin niyo lang po. Paano po natin nalaman na yung palay, pwede pala natin makain at magiging bigaytan? Siguro po, tingnan nyo siguro ang tao noon nakikita, tapos nakita niya may tumutubong ganyan dito sa lugar. May tumutubong ganyan. Tapos nakita niya may mga maliliit na grains. Linagay niya sa apoy o saan, tapos nakita niya bumutok, nabuksan, tapos meron siyang bigas at kanin. Right? Dahil nung linuto niya may tubig, may kanin. Okay. Nakita niya ngayon to. Sabi niya, mahusay na pagkain to. No? Ang gagawin niya, bakit sabog-sabog? Maghihintay lang siya, hindi niya alam. So ang ginawa niya, siguro, baka pwede kong itanim ito. No? para hindi na ako naghahanap-hanap kung saan, tinanim niya. Tapos nakita niya rin na kung saan tumatubo ito, may tubig. Tapos may panahon na paglabas ng araw,
Lalong
dumadami.
Right.
No? So, ginawa niya yon. Ano po ang nangyayari dyan? Ang nangyayari dyan, ginagamit niya yung kanyang creativity, matuklasan yung science of growing crops. Di ba po? Ngayon, kung natuklasan niya yun ito, aba, hindi lang niya pinapakain sa kamag-anak niya. Pati ngayon, yung kapitbahay niya, napapakain niya.
Right.
Tapos, nagtulungan sila, pinalaki pa yung taniman. Hindi lang kapitbahay ang napapakain nila, yung lahat na.
Yung barangay.
So, what else? Their ability to survive,
Yes.
no, is triggered by the creativity of man, no, all the time, all the time, and that creativity is always used before, thousands of years ago, and now, all the time towards improving the quality of life of man, and able to sustain
Right.
an increasing number of populations.
Right. So let's show this graph just to illustrate, no. Ito po, you want to go through?
No,
it?
go ahead.
Sige. So yung una nakikita natin yung Greek classical period, which is 300
BC.
BC, before Christ. So ito yung population ng tao. And then after around mga 800 to 1000, we have the Islamic Renaissance, which means when we say Renaissance po, it means a explosion of ideas for science and all. Paano discovering principles, physical principles, agriculture, yung mga ganon. So
Just added, it's Islamic Renaissance po yan. Tandaan niyo po. That's the role of the Islam, Muslims at that time, the Arabs at that time. Kasi ang dami nilang na-contribute sa science, yung kanilang peoples, no, dito sa Middle East.
This graph is only concentrating on the population figures, but you can see there are long periods. For example, yung Greek Classical Renaissance up to the Islamic Renaissance, medyo hindi masyado malaki yung explosion ng population. So you can research sa history po kung bakit ganon, bakit ganon.
Pero
slowly. So, and then you go from the Islamic, we have another 200 years or so. We have China's Neo-Confucian Renaissance. Now, Confucius was the time of the Greek classical period, maybe even before that. So, they discovered Confucian principles, and kita mo may bump pataas. Now, this is world population, hindi to, but we just wanted to emphasize kung ano yung mangyayari sa world history and the population going up. So, as we went along, after the China's Neo-Confucian Renaissance, we approached the Renaissance of Europe na nakita natin about 1400. Okay? And which led to the Industrial Revolution. And then you see, sobrang taas ang spike ng mga tao, the population. Ibig sabihin, there were scientific principles at the time that were discovered by philosophers, scientists, mathematicians. There was, when you say Renaissance, nag-explode po yung cooperation ng mga dalubhasa. Collaborating with each other. Ano ba to? Paano natin ayusin to? Ano ba tong in science, in math, in physics, in whatever, nagsabog. And you can see a direct correlation na tumaas yung populations.
The population of the world.
Of the world. Hindi lang sa...
as influenced by the scientific discoveries of this era. Yung Greek cultural period, tapos yung Islamic Renaissance, tapos yung isa yung Confucian, tapos yung isang European Renaissance, yung
Right.
1500, somewhere there.
Yes.
Okay. Pag sinabi po nating Renaissance, lalo na yung sa European Renaissance, kasi much of the world before, kanya mahina ang development. Kasi meron mga taong dati nagsusuppress ng creativity of man.
Right.
Pinipigil. Pag meron silang natutuklasan, yung mga leader yung mga ibang tao, ayaw nilang isiwalat ito sa maramihan tao, kaya sa kanila lang. Kaya ang epekto ay hindi masyadong dramatic. Pero ang karunungan, you cannot permanently suppress it. Somehow the truth or knowledge will seek find a way to benefit humankind.
Yes.
So pag ganyan pagdating po dito sa European Renaissance, mabigat po yan kasi ang una diyan po yung French at ang liderato po ng mga bansang yon, mga hari at mga reyna, mga emperor, no? Pero itong I think it was Louis XIV. Ang sabi niya, pag hindi ko katulong yung tao, no?
Yeah.
Hindi ko mapapakain. Kinakailangan kasama ko sila sa pagtulong sa pag-unlad ng bansang France. At so ginawa niya ng paraan at gumawa siyang konsepto, ang tinatawag na principle of commonwealth.
Right.
Okay? Commonwealth, ang ibig sabihin, itong bansang ito ay atin lahat. Sa reyna, sa hari, tsaka sa inyo din. Kinakailangan magtulungan tayo. At kayo lahat na may kakaalaman, ipagtulungan natin ang pagpapaunlad nito. That was the start of the Renaissance period. Because the creativity of man, the genius of man was let loose.
Yes.
No? At biglang nag-explode, no, ang productivity ng bansang yon. That was also the time that France became the ascendant country in the whole of Europe. Siya yung parang biglang lumaki ng populasyon.
Siya yung superpower.
Yung posisyon ng Amerika ngayon,
Yan yung France.
siya yung posisyon ng France noon, nung nag-umpisa ang Renaissance sa kanila. So after that, lahat na ng bansa nakinabang.
Nakisama.
At nakikita nyo kung paano in just a shorter period, ilang decades yun, no? Kaya dumami ang capacity of human to sustain life. How the science that they've been discovered at that time had increased its capacity to sustain a greater number of populations.
Right. I wanted to emphasize po, when you say Renaissance po, the only way populations will increase is if medicine is discovered and available to people, if agriculture and food is being able to, and that's only through science po. That is only through. And I wanted to emphasize one last thing. Sige, Ver, can you bring back that? Kita mo, right before the European Renaissance, I think that's 1600 yata, may nag-dip po yung population, parang pababa. Right before yung arrow po. So,
may konti.
May konting pababa. But that era is like 300 years or something. Pababa, okay? Because that was the period of all the wars in Europe. Okay? Kasi at that time po, kasi walang republika eh. Lahat mga hari, mga away sila ng away. And then, ang nangyayari, ang kumikita lang dyan, yung military-industrial complex at the time was a place called Venice. Ang Venice ang nagpapautang sa mga hari at nagpapautang sa mga iba't ibang European countries. O gusto nyo, o wala kayong pera pambili ng armas, pambayad sa mga tao nyo, o ito, papautangin namin kayo. Pero kung nanalo kayo, amin to. Okay, ito yung SOP ni Venice. So para siya yung military, ito yung mga elite bankers at that time. Okay? So nag-dip yung population. And then Louis the 14th came up and he said, tama na to, medyo malabo na to. And he started to move towards this. So there was a relative peace. Relative po kasi may mga gera-gera. Alam mo naman yung mga hari at reyna, mahilig sa mga gera. So, and it steadily went up. But it cannot be sustained kung wala pong scientific discoveries in food, in medicine, kasi kumahaba yung buhay natin. Yung infant mortality rate bumababa. Kasi mas alam na nila, hindi na pa magic yung mga doktor nila at that time. Tapos nag-improve rin yung hygiene. Water, flowing water, river ducts, may mga remedies na sila. Hindi po yet yung mga biogesic natin ngayon. Pero nakakita na sila, alam na namin kung paano, ano yung may sakit ka, ito bibigay na. Hindi perfecto, and you can see the history of man. I wanted to emphasize that kasi hindi po problema ang pagtaas ng population kung ang mundo or kung yung science is applied. Because right now, based on the estimates of the LaRouche Society and LaRouche himself, what we call the potential relative population density, right? Yeah. Of each nation, the potential right now is not where it can be. But with the current level of science and technology, we can sustain maybe 10 or 20 times more the population we have now. Diba?
Ang sabi po dati, of course, it's very difficult to make computations, but the world can sustain up to 25 billion people or even more, no?
With current technology.
With the current technology that we have. This planet that we have can sustain 25 billion people. We are only now 7.5 billion people. No? And yet we want to cut down on the population.
Right.
And the ones that want to cut down population are these people that we had just mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah, I wanted
those that are anti-development.
Right, I wanted to show because there was this recent ang karaniwang gamit are the ones they always use. Itong mga New World Order, ito yung ayaw ng development ng humanity, ayaw ng science, ayaw. What they use is mga tinatawag natin mga scare tactics nila. They will invent a problem. Magdodoktor sila ng mga figures, sasabihin lang, nako, delikado na tong population natin. Kasi nakita ng mga scientifico namin na inuubos na natin yung ozone layer. Ibig sabihin, pag naubos na yung ozone layer, papasok yung sunlight rays more, tas matutunaw tong icebergs, tas malulunod tayo lahat. Okay? Yan ang hindi science. Pero ang objective nila, takutin ng tao para hindi. So in the 1990s, I think, there was this character named Al Gore.
Mga 2000
na ba yan? Okay. 2000, there was this guy called Al Gore. Siguro nakita niyo, he ran for president and he was the vice president po of Bill Clinton. Right? But since he lost, he became what we call yung environmental campaigner. One of his more popular, his most popular movie was called The Inconvenient Truth. Okay,
it was a propaganda movie.
Which wala pang social media at that time, pero lahat ng mga sinihan, lahat ng news, lahat devoted to inconvenience. So I want to show you a couple of videos now before we move on. So the first one is the trailer for the movie Inconvenient Truth. Makikita po natin and then the next one is another LaRouche video on global warming. And then after that, magre-react ulit kami. Sige.
There was before.
If you look at the 10 hottest years ever measured, they've all occurred in the last 14 years. And the hottest of all was 2005. The scientific consensus is that we are causing global warming. I am Al Gore. I used to be the next president of the United States of America. This is Patagonia, 75 years ago, and the same glacier today. This is Mount Kilimanjaro, 30 years ago, and last year. Within the decade, there will be no more snows of Kilimanjaro. This is really not a political issue so much as a moral issue. Temperature increases are taking place all over the world, and that's causing stronger storms.
This is the biggest crisis in the history of this country.
Early this morning, Hurricane Katrina slammed into New Orleans.
Is it possible that we should prepare against other threats besides terrorists?
From Paramount Classics comes a film that has shocked audiences everywhere they've seen it.
The Arctic is experiencing faster melting. If this were to go, sea level worldwide would go up 20 feet. This is what would happen in Florida. Around Shanghai, home to 40 million people. The area around Calcutta, 60 million. Here's Manhattan. The World Trade Center Memorial would be underwater. Think of the impact of a couple 100,000 refugees, and then imagine 100 million. We have to act together to solve this global crisis. Our ability to live is what is at stake.
We are currently in the face of a rapidly accelerating international financial collapse. Billions are being threatened by a water crisis combined with a global food shortage, and the repeated failure of political leadership to competently address these matters has made the overall crisis even worse. Given this state of the world around you, wouldn't it be a proper occasion to ask, what actually governs your society? Take the fanaticism around global warming. The science indicates that these changes in the Earth's climate are determined by solar cycles, orbital changes, and interstellar radiation. Yet even potentially decent leaders are still going along with the green policies that will vastly accelerate the economic breakdown. So if it's not a matter of science, then what is driving our nation down a path of green fascism? To be clear on these matters, examine how the British Empire created the modern environmentalist movement. The ideological and political basis is demonstrated by the founders of the movement, Julian Huxley, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, and the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. These three have played key roles for the British Empire going back to before World War II. Following in the footsteps of his grandfather, Thomas Huxley, known as one of the pioneers of race science, Julian Huxley was obsessed with population control and eugenics. He continued his grandfather's legacy, acting as vice president of the British Eugenics Society during the bulk of World War II, and later became president. Julian was, by all means, not shy about his disgust for humanity.
The lowest strata of people are reproducing too fast. Therefore, they must not have too easy access to relief or hospital treatment, lest the removal of the last check on natural selection should make it too easy for children to be produced or to survive. Long unemployment should be a grounds for sterilization.
Around the same time period, in the 1930s, Prince Philip was being educated at the elite school of Salem Castle in Germany, while it was being run by the Nazis, who had made race science at the core of the curriculum. Many of his relatives were themselves either pro-Nazi or members of the SS, while Philip developed secret ties with the pro-Nazi British King Edward VIII. Oh, and speaking of British Empire Nazis, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands was recruited to Nazi intelligence at Berlin University in 1934. He then became a member of the SS and went to work for IG Farben, which pioneered Hammerschacht's slave labor concentration camps. Even when he was forced to resign from the Nazi SS for political reasons relating to his marriage, he maintained his unwavering loyalty to the Nazi Party up to the very last moment, signing his letter of resignation, Heil Hitler. In return, Hitler sent him a congratulatory letter for his marriage. Obviously, the publicity of the atrocities committed during World War II made eugenics and Nazism not too popular after the war. Julian Huxley pulled away from his public support of eugenics and became the first head of the United Nations Educational, Social, and Cultural Organization. He stated in UNESCO's founding document,
"Thus, even though it is quite true that radical eugenics policy will be for many years politically and psychologically impossible, it will be important for UNESCO to see that the public mind is informed of the issues at stake, so that much that is now unthinkable may at least become thinkable."
Soon after, Huxley co-founded the International Union for the Conservation of Nature to continue the British Empire's population control and eugenics policy under a new name, conservation, or as it was later called, environmentalism. Prince Philip likewise took up the cause of environmentalism, taking a personal commitment to reduce the global population by billions. As he later expressed in multiple interviews, he wishes to be reincarnated as a deadly virus to aid in reducing the world population. By 1960, a 74-year-old Julian Huxley decided to take an extensive 3-month tour of Africa. Why? To preach that the newly independent African nations could not be trusted to conserve wildlife. The following year, Huxley would join up with Prince Philip and Prince Bernhard to found the World Wildlife Fund as a new front for the British Empire to continue their imperial, genocidal policies. This is the ideological basis for the creation of the so-called environmentalist movement. Hatred of human scientific and technological progress, driven by the utterly degenerate view of mankind as nothing but an animal, a beast to be trained and manipulated, conditioned and culled. The desire of the empire? To reduce the world population down to 1 to 2 billion people and keep the vast majority of those remaining in a backwards, indigenous state. Here we find the philosophical core of the countercultural attack directed at the baby boomer generation. From Silent Spring to the population bomb, they were subjected to psychological warfare intended to break the United States culture away from any commitment toward actual human progress. The baby boomers were conditioned to believe that man was a scourge on the planet, and any desire to improve mankind's living conditions, especially through application of nuclear power, must be stopped. The global warming hoax was introduced in 1975 through a conference organized by Margaret Mead. Bringing together the followers of this anti-human doctrine in the United States, the entire conference was run under the presumptions that mankind's development was inherently going to devastate the planet. That was the only thing that mattered to the organizers of the conference. Scientific accuracy was secondary, and only relevant to the degree that it could be manipulated to justify their desired policy of halting progress and reducing the population. The conference featured followers of Paul Ehrlich, whose fraudulent work, The Population Bomb, was a reintroduction of the work of Thomas Malthus. Ehrlich himself believed that we should cut the U.S. population in half. Typical of Ehrlich's followers at this 1975 conference was Stephen Schneider, notorious for saying,
"To capture the public imagination, we have to offer up some scary scenarios, make simplified dramatic statements, and little mention of any doubts one might have. Each of us has to decide the right balance between being effective and being honest."
Schneider later became a major participant in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the supposed scientific authority regarding global warming. Under the direction of Mead, the emphasis of the 1975 conference was not science, but on obtaining a consensus agreement on the proper scare stories needed to push their policy. As Mead said herself at the conference,
"What we need from scientists are estimates presented with sufficient conservatism and plausibility, but at the same time as free as possible from internal disagreements that can be exploited by political interests. That will allow us to start building a system of artificial but effective warnings. Warnings which will parallel the instincts of animals who flee before the hurricane.
It was out of this conference that the hoax of man-made global warming was born. This was never about science. It is the British Empire's policy for genocide. So before you react or come to a consensus with your friends and neighbors, make sure you actually know where your impulses are coming from. Just because you share an opinion, how do you know it's really yours?
Okay, reactions. Grabe. So I wanted to just say, the first video was the Al Gore trailer. Kita nyo naman, napaka-produce. And then the second one was much later, which is the LaRouche movement. And talking about this global warming at the height of the hysteria of global warming. And kung saan galing tong pag-iisip na to. And why it's false and why it's hoaxed.
Tatandaan niyo po yung kay Al Gore. That movie was seen, I think, in 2006. It was talking about the global warming, that it was going to be devastating to the rest of the world, and by I think he said 12 years from that time, hundreds of millions of people will die because they will be going underwater. Even at the time when the movie was being made, we knew it was a hoax. It was a major campaign, but it was a hoax. It was a lie.
Yeah.
And he was being given a lot of money to be the poster boy for this.
Mainstream media.
Lahat sila. No. First of all, it didn't happen. Tsaka yung kanilang mga pinapakitang mga letrato doon, pipicture nila yung snow, pagkatapos pipicture nila walang snow, yung bundok. They just have to take the picture maybe at springtime, the other one during winter. At lolokohin tayo, tapos sasabihin nila itong nangyayari.
Right.
That was what's happening. But as you can see, if you caught on some of the quotes that you would hear from Margaret Mead, the one from Paul Ehrlich, the one from Julian Huxley,
Yes.
At nandiyan po, anong sinasabi nila? Sinasabi nila kinakailangan gagawa ng paraan para matakot yung tao, no? Para takutin mo yung tao na magre-react sila parang mga hayop, no? Parang mga hayop na tinatakot mo, patakbo, paalis, yung mga ganyan. And this is what they wanted. And then it is clear that they were wanted to use a lie, no? Here using the environment, no? For what? Why is it that they didn't want? They wanted to use the environment in the guise of trying to save animals, in the guise of trying to save nature. Ang ginamit nila, nature and animals, no, is against the development.
Right.
So, sino bang nasa development? Human beings. Tapos, pag gusto ng human beings ng development, kawawa naman yung mga hayop. Ito ang direksyon nitong mga environment. Why was that the case now? So, what they wanted is for the world through fear. Through fear.
Propaganda.
Katulad ng ginagawa ngayon sa atin, fear.
Yeah.
Fear. Through fear, humankind will stop developing. Humankind will stop being creative, no? And not go into scientific the basis for development. And if that is the case, sabi nila, we will save the animals.
Right.
But what happens to humans? Well, the humans will not be reproducing that much. Dahil they will be weak, and they will be poor. Dahil they will not have the ability to sustain life. No? So, mababawasan ang populasyon. That's why they were calling it, the moderator was calling it genocide. And this idea of genocide does not start only now. No, it has been a kind of thinking even way before, decades ago, even to some extent a century, 2 centuries ago. No? Ganyan yung kind of thinking of man wanting humanity to decrease so that they can control it. Up to now, this is what's happening.
I wanted to emphasize certain things also dun sa pinunod natin. And we'll bring it around and connect it to what's happening today also. Yung nakita po natin, yung una is, kung napansin nyo po, pwede naman i-review sa our archive videos after this show, no? Si Thomas Huxley po, yung kanyang grandfather ni Julian Huxley.
Julian Huxley, ang grandfather niya si Thomas
Huxley.
Huxley.
Si Thomas Huxley is the grandfather of Julian Huxley, right? Okay, so si Thomas Huxley, siya po yung kumbaga PR and pinaka-ahente ng isang famous na scientist called Charles Darwin. Okay? And Charles Darwin promoted, the theory that nature and man is a survival of the fittest. And only the most fittest survive. And even within mankind, there are more human beings, there are examples of fitter human beings and then yung human beings na hindi fully human. Okay? Yan po si Thomas Huxley. Yung kanyang grandson na si Julian Huxley, ganon rin ang pag-iisip, syempre, yan ang tinuro sa kanya. Siya po yung naging head ng Smithsonian Museum sa United States. He became the head of UNESCO, the first thing in UNESCO.
UNESCO is United Nations.
I forget the...
For children yan eh.
Yeah. May UNICEF, which is the children yata. UNESCO is social something, economic and social. And siya pa yung founding member nun. Bakit itinatag yung UNESCO? And the founding member, as a founding member, nakita po niya, yung quotes niya, sabi niya, UNESCO must put forward the ideas nga of depopulation in essence. Na kahit not comfortable pag-usapan, kailangan maggawa sila ng paraan. Yung mission namin is gumawa ng paraan para makumbinse ang mga tao na hindi naman ganun kasama yung depopulation. In other words, naging propaganda arm using the funds that UNESCO gets. This is Julian Huxley. Together with Prince Philip and Prince Bernard, who nakita natin very close ties to the Nazi Party. Okay? Very close ties po kay Hitler himself.
They were card-bearing members of the Nazi Party.
Yes, and si Prince Philip nga, nung nagpakasal siya kay Queen Elizabeth, hindi po naimbita yung kanyang mga kapatid kasi Nazi sila. So ayaw nilang yung bad press. Medyo masamang tignan pag Nazi. But they are. And the World Wildlife Fund was built on those principles po. What are those principles? Those principles, nakita natin po yung slide na pinapakita natin kanina about humanity's population and how technology impacts the ability of humankind to grow, sustain, and develop. What they represent, itong mga Julian Huxley, Margaret Mead, and these guys, is the fight, nasabi po natin sa umpisa, the fight against this human development. Anti-human sila. Gusto nila less people para yung elite lang ang mag-rule. And you have to look at this, and I want to emphasize this, and I'm going to bring this back to, that's why I said, how is nuclear power related to COVID? Kita mo yung sinasabi ni Al Gore na proven false na lahat ng sinasabi niya. Nabuking na yung IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, na mali-mali yung kanilang datos at manufactured pa from the East Anglia University. Parang in-exaggerate nila yung datos para magmukhang Terrible, hindi naman. Okay? Hindi naman talaga ganun kasama. Pero pinapalabas nila ganun kasama. Nagiging propaganda po. Okay? Think about what they said. Hindi kailangan ng science. Remember, nag-conference sila in 1975. Pinakita kanina ng report ni Brian Dennis. 1975 na conference sila. Ang lumabas sa conference, sabi nila, kailangan makumbinsi ang tao na hindi ganun kasama ang depopulation. Okay? Na kailangan makumbinsi ang taong sa mundo na wag mag-develop, wag dumami yung tao sa mundo. Dapat bumaba yung population. And how are they going to do that? They will say, we have to put out studies, and we have to put out propaganda, articles, studies, and everything on TV, movies. We have to support this. Some science, konting science, pero yung iba, puro purong propaganda lang. Kasi hindi naman talaga nag-iisip yung tao. Yan ang sinasabi nila. Ang gusto nila, papalabasin, tas matakot tayo, para ang gusto nilang gawin natin, yan ang gagawin natin pag lumabas. Now, isipin po natin, mag-isip-isip po tayo, yung vaccine po ng COVID, dumating. Right? This whole COVID. Wag na natin going back to everything that we know about COVID. Pero just this recent, yung vaccine na sinabi ng COVID. Nung dumating na, may Sinovac, may ganyan. Pero yung taong bayan, tila ayaw pa rin magpabakuna. Takot magpabakuna. And recently, biglang nagpalabas ng DOH, 5,000 ang bagong cases. Nakakatakot.
Biglang malaki.
Tapos ang ganda ng ni round off lang yata nila yun eh. Kasi 5,000, eksakto, ang galing nila. Okay? Saan nakuha yung datos? Wala naman nagko-question sa DOH eh. Kung saan nakuha yung datos eh. Di ba? Sila na nagpapalabas eh. So nung nagpalabas na yun, kuha lahat ng media, itong mga taong bayan naman, takot. Biglang ang gagawin, tapos, on top of that, habang tinatakot, biglang lockdown na naman, may curfew na naman tayo ng mga mayor. 10 to 5 daw kasi tumataas yung mga kaso eh. Anong klaseng kaso? COVID? Hindi, yung mga variant. Saan galing yung mga variant? Di namin alam, basta nakita namin may variant. Yan ang papalabas nila sa tao. So ngayon, yung tao takot, hindi alam kung anong gagawin. On top of, wala nang makain, wala kasing trabaho, na lockdown na lahat ng buong ekonomiya. We're not going into changing. And even if we open up again, like Chairman has said, it does not mean the economy is solved. Tapos na yung problema. Because we are actually facing a bigger problem. And the bigger problem has nothing to do with this supposed pandemic na hindi naman totoo. Okay? It has everything to do with the economy and the science and the fight for Filipinos and all countries to develop their populations according to their own desires and plans.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that those that want humankind to follow a direction or moving humankind towards one direction or not, never use development as a objective. Never say that we have to go here so that we will develop. Never say that we must work together so that we will develop. They move humankind. That means governments, businesses, even educational institutions, no? By fear. Right? Fear. They will come up with a lie, no? Tatakutin ka para gumalaw ka parang hayop. Ang hayop po,
hindi
reacts by fear. No? Pag pag tumatakbong ganyan, magpaputok ka dito, tatakbong pala yun.
Right.
Di ba po? O mag-clap kang ganyan, magugulat siya, tatakbo agad.
Right.
By fear. And that is what they're using now on human beings. Those that have enough kokote, those that have enough reason, must understand that this is what is being done.
Right.
Of course, the whole thing is your decision, but we want to bring out here, and that's the way. That the reason we brought you to a little history. We want you to realize that this system has been long in the making. And every period of our existence have come up with this. But nothing yet as grave as this. Why? Because the objective is to destroy mankind. The objective is to bring us to a level of paralyzed, to be
Di makagalaw.
Di makaisip dahil sa takot. Now, governments will impose themselves. Hindi natin alam kung sabi nga nila si Duterte daw, New World Order. Pwede. Pero it could also be because of ignorance.
Right.
Kasi nadadala din siya dito sa mga kasinungalingan na lumalabas.
Right.
At etong mga tauhan niya, ganyan na rin. Bakit? Itong bang mga nasa gobyerno, si Duterte ba at yung mga kabinete, mas matalino ba sa inyo? Kadalasan po, makikita nyo, daming mga bobo dyan di ba? Kadalasan din, marami sa kanila mga dupang, mga ganid, mga greed, mga magnanakaw, at yun ang mangingibabaw sa kanilang intensyon. Pero yan po ang kalaban ng tao talaga for all of our times. If they use fear, what do you counter fear with? How do you counter fear? Tapang? Ganyan? Hindi po hindi ba ba? You can only counter fear by knowledge. You have to do your own research and understand what you're researching. Right now, huwag kayong masyadong, okay lang tayo, naririnig nyo sa amin, tapos sasabihin nyo sinabi namin. Pero ang gusto po namin, ito pong sinasabi namin, mga pangalan, Julian Huxley, Prince Barnard, yung mga ganyan, Al Gore. Tingnan nyo po, meron naman kayong pang-Google, do your own research and try to validate what we're saying. And then if it is, then you follow your own reasoning. We are confident, like us, when hindi naman po kami basta-basta naniniwala sa ganito, sa ganyan. Meron pong pinag-uumpisan yan. We try to say that we must not react on the basis of what we think. Or how do you say, it is how we must learn
how to think,
and not just react to what others want us to think. We have to learn how to think for ourselves. No? And meron po tayong kakayanan, lahat. But you just have to do that. When you look for knowledge, please, alam nyo na ang mainstream media, maraming sinungaling dyan. Alam nyo na yan. Alam nyo na nabayaran yung mga iba dyan. Alam nyo na yan. Bakit doon ka pa maghahanap ng information? Hanapin nyo yung sarili. And when you find out the truth and when you have knowledge, no one can take it away from you. And you will see that is the first step towards conquering fear. Because you know what they're doing.
Right.
You know what they're doing and you know how to react to it.
Right.
Hindi ba po? No?
Right.
Importante po ito. And this thing about COVID, vaccines, and we always say we don't agree to mandatory nature vaccination. Hindi po natin agad-agad sasabihin na walang such a thing as COVID-19 dahil meron po.
Yeah.
Ang hindi lang natin alam, was it manufactured by man or was it natural? Sa aming pong palagay, it was manufactured by man. Di ba po? Tapos, dahil dito, sabi nila, magbenta tayo ng vaccines. So, siyempre, pasok na dyan yung mga oligarko, yung mga gustong magbenta ng mga vaccine. Dito lang sa Pilipinas, ang sabi nila, ang ginastos, ang hiniram na ng pamahalaan natin para labanan netong COVID at saka bumili ng vaccine ay 10 trillion pesos na. What is 10 trillion pesos? My goodness.
Can't even imagine.
So, you're talking probably of what? 200 billion?
Kasi may lumabas rin na sabi ng World Bank, we will loan you 500 million to purchase the vaccines. $500 million.
Yeah.
So, times 250 million.
Trillion na eh. So, a trillion, any rate, it's either $20 billion or $20 billion or $200 billion. I think it's $20 billion. Yan po ang hiniram na natin. At saan po pumunta? Sa bulsa ng mga tao. Anong epekto po? Talaga bang aayusin natin sa ating ekonomiya? Hindi po. Alam natin yan. Alam po ng mga ekonomista natin yan sa gobyerno. We are in a great depression. Alam niyo po, yung Great Depression sa Amerika noong 1929 to 1933, bumagsak po ang ekonomiya ng Amerika. At nung bumagsak yan, ang marami pong ginugutom, marami pong nagpapakamatay dahil wala silang pakain sa pamilya nila. At maraming namamatay sa gutom. Ang unemployment rate at the time was 50%. Dito po sa atin, according to ECO, Employers Confederation of the Philippines, ang unemployment rate po natin is 75%. At that time, the U.S. had a Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he knew how to turn the economic situation around. At he had the courage to do that because he was facing the oligarchs of his time. Dito po sa Pilipinas, ang laki po ng duda ng marami. Kasama na po ako dyan. Na ang ating Pangulo, hindi niya alam paikutin ang sitwasyon ng ating ekonomiya. He will not be able to reverse it. For as long as he depends on his economic managers, our situation will get worse and worse and worse. Right. And the future is very, very bleak. We might be facing very soon a condition of chaos and anarchy. Ngayon po nakikita nyo nakikita nyo to itong pagpapatay sa kalye with impunity, with walang walang takot, walang kaba na basta-basta na lang papatayin ng pulis, yung mga ganito, yung mga ganyan. Tapos lalagyan pa nila ng baril, kunwari droga o ganyan. Alata, nahuli na. Nandyan sa CCTV, klarong-klaro. Tapos ang kapal-kapal nila, sasabihin ng happy nila, shoot out daw yan eh. Tapos investigahin pa natin. Gusto sabihin, wala na. No? Alam ng tao yan eh. Kung ganyan ang pulis mo, ang tao, paano din magre-react? Ganyan na rin, di ba? Kasi aabot din ng panahon na hindi nakakayanan ng pulis ang manghuli. And so we will get into this chaotic, anarchic situation. All because our leadership might have been negligent or ignorant. We hope it is not like that. And we hope the President listens to other people, not just to defend your position. Be man enough to say, I was wrong, and so we will do it this way now.
Yes.
I was wrong, so I'm firing this Sanabagan Duque because he has misled me into thinking this way. It takes courage to do it. But that is what we believe the President has. Di po ba? So, let's do it. And the only, and we always say, yung mahiwagang bakuna,
yes.
The way to start this, to start it in the right foot. And so we are facing the right direction for recovery. You declare a state of emergency in accordance with Article 12, Section 17 and 18 by our Constitution, which says that the government in a time of national crisis will take over the management and control of all public utilities. Yan po. Take over and control all public utilities. Para ano pong gagawin? Siyempre, para ibaba ang halaga na sinisingil sa atin sa kuryente, sa tubig at iba pa. Gaano kalaki ang ibababa? Kaya po natin, maski na 75% ang ibaba, kakayanin po natin yan. Mamawalan ba ng trabaho itong mga ito na nagtatrabaho dyan? Hindi po. Sila ang mananatili. Sila ang hindi mawawalan ng trabaho, yung mga trabador dyan. Ang mawawalan ng trabaho, yung mga oligarko. Sila ang mawawala. Mawawalan sila ng pinagkikitaan nila ng halos 3 dekada. Tapos, saan po natin sila ilalagay? Kung tayo po yung susunod at pakinggan po tayo ng ating Pangulo, itulak natin itong mga oligarkos sa mga industriya na mapapakinabangan ng ating buong bansa. Industriya ng bakal, industriya ng pharmaceuticals, gamot, gawaan ng fertilizer, at smelting plants, agro-industrial projects. Marami pong may lalagay yan. Ito po ang sasalo ng mga kakailanganin nating trabahador. We need employment. As of now, wala po tayong may bibigay na employment. Pati na yung mga call centers na yan, hindi na kayang pumila pa ng tao dahil yung pinagtatrabahuan nilang call center sa nangailangan ng call center sa ibang bansa, nagserado na. That's the situation we have. And these economic managers we have do not have any inkling. they can tell you that next year will be a 9% growth. That is bullshit. And it's a lie.
Yeah.
Because all you have to ask them is, Mr. Carl Chua, how are you going to reach 9% growth? How? You liar. And that includes Dominguez, Benjokno, and all of you who are traitors to the country.
Okay. So now we have over 10 minutes left. We'll read all of the messages tonight. Again, we'd like to say we, in the interest of public information and in the interest of freedom of information,
Freedom of speech,
we
will read them to the public
as is, but not necessarily reflect those of our opinion. Good evening, Katipunan. Maraming administrations after Ma'am Cory, hindi na dahilan si Ma'am Cory na hindi pa pinaandar ang ating Bataan Nuclear Power Plant. Sayang paek. Mila of Rizal. Correct. Mga namatay sa COVID-19, meron ibang malubhang sakit. Namamatay sa ibang sakit, ibibintang sa COVID. Tanong, meron bang namatay sa COVID na walang ibang sakit? COVID lang talaga ang kinakamatay? Worldwide data on COVID tumaas, dumami nagka-COVID, pero death rate percentage bumaba. Right. Like in Philippines, dumami nagka-COVID, pero death rates bumaba from 2.14% last week. But yesterday, COVID death rates only 2.08. Correct. Latest data from Philippine Statistics Authority show that the number of registered deaths from January to December 2020, only 601,000, lower than total deaths of 620 in the whole year of 2019. So baba pa. Mas marami namatay sa 2019 bago nauso COVID. Most of the deaths in Philippines in 2020 caused by common causes. Heart disease, cancer, TB, pneumonia, diabetes. COVID deaths only 1.5 of Philippine mortality in 2020. Mas maraming namamatay sa ibang sakit kaysa sa COVID. May mga namatay sa COVID, meron ibang malubhang sakit. Namatay sa ibang sakit, ibibintang sa COVID. Tanong, meron bang namatay? Okay, naulit. Okay, you're right. Actually, we had the graph also here na yung instances of flu, zero po sa 2020 at 2021.
Dapat ang presidente naman. No? Kayong mga paligid ng presidente.
Ko naman.
Maawa naman kayo. Pakita niyo po sa presidente yung mga statistikang yan. No? Huwag niyo pong tinatago sa kanya. Dahil ang laking pinsala ang ginagawa niyo sa mamamayan. No? Total, tapos binibingtan ng mamamayan
sa
presidente. Kayong mga gago kayo, nagtatago kayo sa likod ng presidente. Kayo pa naman ang inaasahan magbigay ng katotohanan.
Correct. No? Angelo Reda, good evening Sir Butch Valdes, watching from Malolos. Clitos Espuerta, Congreso Senior. Good evening po, wala nang pag-asa pang maayos ang eleksyon natin dahil andyan pa rin ang Smartmatic at corrupt na COMELEC. Ibinasura na ang hybrid electoral system. Angelo Solano, sabi ni P. Duterte, bubuksan niya economy next week, baliktad lockdown uli. Father of all lies, allied with Satan. Virgie Ariola, gandang gabi po sa inyo. Gatsby Talco, madaling maggoyo ang tao na magrebelde pag mahirap ang buhay. Arok Alip, magandang gabi po mga sirs. The greatest fear is the fear of the unknown. Si John Kennedy at Ferdinand Marcos ay magkatulad na hangarin para sa kanilang bayan in some ways. William Laguno, good evening po sa inyo sa nanonood. Ang mahirap niyan, baka i-privatize na naman, di tataas din ang singil ng kuryente. Japanese Sake, good evening po mga sir Guaping, Sir Butch and Sir Ito. Francisco Tamalia, there's no safe vaccine. Sinovac is an affiliate of Gilead. Remdesivir, which is also under Bill Gates. They are the same dosage with different brand names. Well, it's safe. Your percentage of chances of survival are pretty high even without the vaccine. Stormy Savi, kapag nabuksan ang Bataan, mahirapan magtaas ng Meralco ang singil. Kaso hawak ng gobyerno at media, pati na ang mambabatas natin sa leeg ng oligarchs. You're right. That's why it's important to get that back. Right. Joanna Luilier, good evening po, Sir Butch Valdes and Itos Valdes, KDP. Carlo EY, this talks about pandemic. Elizabeth de los Reyes Gutierrez, good evening po, Sir Butch, Sir Itos from Taytay Rizal. Rodovite Pariabras, maganda po gabi, Sir Itos at Sir Butch. Nag-umpisa na maglabasan ng mga politiko na alaga ng mga oligarko. Una na dyan si Pacquiao, watching you always from Subic. Pwede already
Alam niyo po, palagay ko si Pacquiao hindi po alaga ng oligarko. Ang mga alaga ng oligarko nandyan po sa Senado, pero si Pacquiao hindi po siya, hindi na kailangan ng pera ng oligarko eh. So, yun ang tingin ko lang, no?
Parang hindi. No?
Tingnan niyo po kung magkano kinikita niyan at kung nagagamit yan sa nakaw. No?
Freddy Oredina, present. Adriano Flores, good evening, Kabutch at sa mga kasama mo. Mabuhay po kayo. Isang magandang talakayan na naman po ang naipamahagi sa inyo ngayong linggo. Thank you. Marisa Season, good evening, idols. Good evening and thanks for infos. Mia Nora Zamora, Sir Valdes, hawak ngayon ni Digong ang Smartmatic, kaya walang kwenta ang election sa 2022. Paulo Antonio Pineda, mga maestro, good evening. Yung Rosales, Ontiveros, and Akbayan members ay tutol sa nuclear na dating NPA ang may gawa ng Akbayan, sila Zarate at isang bobo ekonomista ng UP dahil daw may bulkan at sasabog kahit anong oras. Halatang gustong babagsakin ng bansa para daming na-recruit ng NPA. At yung lagman na yan, tutol rin dahil may fault line sa ilalim ng bulkan at sasabog at overpriced kuno.
Tama yan. Marami pong mga ideologues na laban dyan sa BNPP dahil kalaban po nila ang development.
Right.
Yung pong kasama namin dito nung isang araw, kahapon, walang iba kundi si Dr. Carlos Arcilla.
Right.
Yan mga mahal lagman na yan at kung sino-sino pa mga lumalaban. Mga bolero po yan, no? Ito pong si Carlos Arcilla, alam niya, he's a geologist and he has a much better reputation abroad, no? And here about the geological situations of our country, no? These people, Lagman and the rest of them, are just ideologues.
Yeah.
And they're using what they learn to fit their ideology. No?
Yeah. And I would say that they are paid ideologues.
Yeah.
They are paid campaigners. And si Carlos Arcilla, ilang beses na niya pinatunayan na walang problema. Ilang taon na, isang dekada na. Marina Magpale, focus tayo lahat sa mga ginagawa ng Pangulo at mga tunay na naglilingkod ng kanyang pamahalaan. Marami nang gising sa mga nagdaang pamumuno at huwag na natin maulit pa ang nakaraan. Wilfredo Opiniano, gandang gabi mga sir. Bederio Candido Celito, magandang gabi po sa inyo, Sir Butch, Sir Itos. Mabuhay po kayo watching from Riyadh, KSA. Mayet Fuentes, salamat sa inyo. Dami kong natututuan sa programa nyo. Thank you. Nick Bonifacio, buksan na nuclear power plant, please. At dagdagan. Ronnie Geronimo, mabuhay ang ating katipunan. Cesar Velasco, good evening, Sir Butch and Itos, watching from Sinaloan, Laguna. Inoy Lucita, good evening mga sirs. Esther De Luz, good evening mga sirs from Canada. Food Tech Buddies. S-curve of energy sources. Yan, tama. Maybe that was the one. Rog Almazor, good evening mga sirs. Watching from Cavite. DYI Ideas, hello. Lourdes Call, good evening both father and son tandem. Napakagandang topic nyo po lagi. Totoo po yan, nakasulat din po yan sa Daniel chapter 12 verse 4 na ang knowledge ng tao ay increased at yan ay nakikita na. Benji Castro, kalokohan yung mga globalist na yan. Tuloy niya lang sir ang pagsasabi ng totoo, watching from Santa Cruz. Ibahay Aklan. Alfredo Redina, where is the Zionist surname Greta Thunberg? We are created by the Creator, also creators to sustain humans. Abeng Fabro, good evening Sir Butch, Sir Itos, watching from Taguig. Wally Bustamante, magandang gabi po Sir Itos, Sir Butch. May napanood po ako na pelikula na may geosatellite na nagko-control ng panahon. Kaya po iba na ang panahon? Salamat po. Yeah, I think there's what they call a weather influencer technology. So, we'll see. I don't know. Hindi pa natin po alam for sure. Arnold La Chica, good evening po. Sa akin lang sir, lahat ng neural lang yung mga ice na yan. Hindi naman lulubog ang mundo dahil neural lang dahil sa mundo rin natin galing maliban na kung Mars galing, syempre dagdag bigat. Yung ice. Saka hindi po totoo na natutunaw lahat ng iceberg. Hindi po totoo yun. Catalina Guevara, good evening po. Ben Bantil, they come to destroy, steal, and kill. Yan po ang ministry ng Antichrist. At papasok na tayo sa tribulation period. At ang starter na ginamit ay itong pandemic. Noli Palubueno, COVID martial law, wala na silang pakialam, naghihirap mga tao. DOH, mga sinungaling, tumaas ang namatay sa COVID. Tinatakot lang mga tao para tanggapin ang bakuna. Okay.
Okay, sa ngalan po ng ating mga katipon dito sa ating katipunan at sa mga galing na staff ng DZXL Radyo Nationwide, kami po ay pansamantalang nagpapaalam at nagpapasalamat na sinamahan nyo kami ngayon, ang ora de peligro ng ating bayan at ng buong mundo dito po sa ating katipunan. Hanggang sa linggo po muli, mga katipon, 7 to 9 p.m. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat.
Inyong napakinggan si Itos Valdes kasama si Cathy Cruz at iba pang katipon na nakilahok sa talakayan.
Ating Katipunan.
Samahang muli si Itos Valdes sa susunod na linggo alas 7 hanggang alas 9 ng gabi sa himpilan ng RMN DZXL 558 kHz AM band at social media accounts ng Partido KDP.
Ating Katipunan.